introduction to Mexico City was a blue glowing sleep pod in the airport. I landed at midnight and didn't necessarily feel like navigating a city the size of Rhode Island. I fell asleep to a call-in show for victims of the occult. You could call this couple and say, "Help, my sister burned an altar in my yard and now my husband is bald and we're poor." And they would say, "Okay, I will step on this doll about that." The next day, I started in the Zócalo, where Dia de los Muertos was in full swing. This year, the ofrendas, or offerings, were in honor of Pancho Villa, the largest, depicting him as a historically accurate 100-foot centaur skeleton. Pretty much everywhere you looked were calaveras, or skeletons. The inherited Aztec obsession with death, in combination with Catholic All Saints' Day, make it one of the most unique and nuanced holidays in the world. Not only are we celebrating the memory of lost loved ones, it's also kind of making fun of death. It's cartoonish and colorful. Beforehand, every single blogger and YouTuber I watched said, in no way is it a Mexican Halloween, so do not bring your sexy superhero costume. And for this reason, I would like to invite every single blogger and YouTuber to Halloween night in the streets of Teotihuacan. This is the busiest crowd I've ever been in. You had absolutely no control of where you were walking. At one point, we made an exit for genuine fear of crowd crush. And one thing you couldn't get away with in America is the chainsaw clowns. You know how at the end of a haunted house, there's often a chainsaw guy running after you? Well, imagine that unprompted just in the street. It happened a lot, and it was fucking terrifying. The bloggers are correct, though, in that the holidays are different, just sort of overlapping and spooky. The majority of Dia de los Muertos is celebrated privately at home with family. A colorful ofrenda is built with your loved ones' photos and their favorite foods and items. Usually a trail of cempasúchil flowers to guide their spirits from the door to their old favorite ice-cold Coors Light or whatever. It made me wish we had something like this, a yearly remembrance. It was more emotional than I expected, given only 3 weeks before I was in Colorado for my grandfather's funeral. Which could not have been further from the dancing skeletons of downtown Mexico City. Packing up his stuff, organizing his photos, thinking about him during quiet walks in the Rockies. I had already planned for Dia de los Muertos, but not for how much my headspace would already be occupied with death. The relationship everyone has with death, whether it's a linear Christian way of thinking, a more Eastern, cyclical idea of rebirth, like a Taco Bell that was once a house, or somewhere in between, like at the Cannabis Church in Denver. Regardless, it's a nice thought that maybe for a night you can hang out together again and think of old times.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Happy number 22.
On top of Beaver Creek Mountain.
Beaver Creek Mountain.
At my hostel, they were nice enough to allow me to add his photo to the ofrenda. So I hope if he did stop by, I hope he was asking, what the hell am I doing in Mexico? Back in Mexico City, I got dinner in Plaza Garibaldi, a famous square with restaurants. What I didn't know is that it's more famous for mariachi. It's a great vibe. That is, until it starts to get later and you realize the more people buy songs, the more bands the restaurant lets in. Until it's an absolute cacophony of clashing music. An hour north are the ruins of Teotihuacan, a reminder of just how ancient everything is, even the culture itself. It's so ancient it predates the Aztecs by 1,000 years. To this day, no one knows what the city was called. Teotihuacan was the Aztec Nahuatl language word for it. And so the state we were observing this in was probably the same as an Aztec person would have seen it, assuming they figured out the bus drop-off from CDMX East. One goal of mine was to see the Isla de Muñecas in Xochimilco, the abandoned island covered in terrifying garbage dolls. Xochimilco is characterized by a sprawling series of man-made floating islands the Aztecs built, and its canals are some of the only remains of Lake Texcoco, a massive lake Tenochtitlan was built on before the Spanish drained it. The islands appear natural, but are indeed technically floating, tethered to the lake floor via tree roots. In order to get to the island, you need to book a trajinera or party boat. There are hundreds around, so it's easy to book passage. Unless the gondolier leaves and is replaced by his 11-year-old daughter who has no intention of taking you there. She took us to multiple bootleg doll islands. Yes, there are fake ones. And she was completely upfront in that they weren't the actual island. We stopped at a pulque island and I got a drink. Pulque is a drink that's at least 3,000 years old. It's about as alcoholic as a beer and is unfortunately a similar viscosity to snot. It's not bad though. My favorite footage from this is from after she asks if my friend wants to try rowing, and the moment he agrees, she happily eats her lunch and lets him steer. All throughout the ride, she claimed we needed to buy more time to see Isla Muñecas, only to ultimately take us back and even then demand a tip further. I felt disappointed, frustrated, and seriously bummed out with how much I argued with a child that day. It was kind of wild, a situation where you know you're being scammed, the person knows you know they're scamming you, and there's nothing anyone can do except enjoy a ride down the river. It's one of those moments when traveling that you need to cut your losses, and I came to recognize that. With how beautiful and interesting this area was, I knew it could redeem itself, which it absolutely did on my second try a week later. But the week before, I explored...
Hola. No comprendo español.
Puebla. It's about 1 hour south and one active volcano away from Mexico City. I arrived fairly late at night and my room had a giant dripping brain popsicle. I went out to find a local bar and accidentally crashed this guy's birthday. After a while, they warmly welcomed me, and even though the bar closed, insisted I stay for the private party. And this couple came through that, I guess, walks from bar to bar with a bespoke mobile karaoke rig and takes tips for song requests. So I requested Smashing Pumpkins, and he asked if I could Google the lyrics for him. I didn't have service, so he sang it in gibberish, presumably hoping I wouldn't notice. Puebla is known for the Battle of Cinco de Mayo, 288 churches, and an extremely rare drink called La Pasita. Pasita is a raisin liqueur served with goat cheese inside. I showed up all 3 afternoons to try it out, but the old man essentially opens the bar when he feels like it. However, I had stupidly overlooked a family-run sister location and finally got to try it. Strange, but completely delicious. I brought a bottle back to the States. Did you know the world's largest pyramid is in the hot sauce town? Well, not exactly, because the hot sauce has nothing to do with Cholula. The founders just really like this town, and it's easy to see why. As for the Great Pyramid of Cholula, it's a bit hard to tell it's there. It's become overgrown with grass, and the Spanish planted a big church on top of it, as if to say, haha, our spirituality wins. The view is breathtaking, though after the climb I don't envy anyone who comes to Mass here every Sunday.
No encuentro cómo levantarme. Fui a los...
I returned to Mexico City because it was time to meet the dolls. I had met a beekeeper from Xochimilco who said she raised bees on one of the islands. She would arrange us a boat if I was okay with stopping by to meet the bees. First night back in town, I crashed at a so-called beer hotel in South CDMX. There was beer everywhere, although none to drink, and no other people. And the TV had never been turned on, and lots of neon signs saying more beer on the roof. This is a trap, right? Like for some giant alien Venus flytrap that wants to lure 30-year-old beard guys. The beer I did purchase was very warm, because the fridge wasn't plugged in until I asked for some. The guy seemed pretty confused I was there and didn't seem to know anything about the beer at all when I asked. Nobody else is at the beer hotel, and I'm starting to think it's a trap. Reception kinda looked like aliens, and they don't even have a tap. It isn't the season for a Christmas tree. Did I mention there's aliens? Literally, I've made a huge mistake. That or I'm not awake. After surviving the beer hotel, I returned to Xochimilco with my new beekeeper friend. She had arranged us a boat with a couple of her friends and some local folks who nobody knew. We got an awesome behind-the-scenes tour of an axolotl habitat from her biologist friend. And as we passed her bee island, she said we wouldn't stop because she saw a rival beekeeper there, and there would be beekeeper drama. As curious as I was as to what beekeeper drama could be, I was mostly relieved to not meet the bees, since my hands were covered in whatever sticky, sweet candy goo was on the rim of my drink. Finally, Isla de Muñecas. As spooky and weird as advertised. The long story short is, a long time ago, the hermit who lived on the island had the misfortune of finding a little girl's body washing up on his shore. The image of her doll traumatized him so much, he kept it and dedicated his life to collecting horrifying blown-out garbage dolls. In fact, I was told if you had your own horrifying blown-out garbage doll, you were welcome to add it to the island. So you can rest easy knowing the horrifying blown-out garbage doll army is not only thriving, it's growing. We spent the rest of the day on the boat having a great time. It is not recommended for tourists to stay in Xochimilco after sunset. But I said yes to the invitation to the local guy's apartment and had a lot of fun. It was maybe the size of a public bathroom, and he was DJing loud enough for hundreds of people. It was a good time.
Son gentes drogadas.
The next day, another friend took me to Six Flags Mexico. I noticed the teacup ride, unlike Disney, didn't really have a cap on how fast you can go, and I made everybody sick.
Oh no! ¡Más rápido! ¡Más rápido! Ah! Oh God! Oh God! Oh.
Karma did catch up with me though. Something I ate somewhere lost me a day. My final stop was a couple days up in Monterrey. I was invited to YouTube Mexico's bowling tournament, and none of us bowled well, but I guess making videos doesn't necessarily make you a crackerjack bowler. I think they gave the trophy to the only guy who got a strike. I've been to 6 cities in Mexico now, and it still feels like I've barely scratched the surface. In Spanish, if you're visiting somewhere you've never been, you use the verb conocer, which translates closer to getting to know someone. And that's how I feel about it. It's a place with endless potential, an iceberg you could never dive deep enough to fully explore. And when you're there, it feels like it wants to get to know you.
Nilsson.
Ah.